Media. Awesome. Let's share the screen. Cool. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to today's event, Put Me in Coach, from Underdog to Overperformer. Today, we're going to be discussing how you can use your data-driven metrics and management skills to take your reps that may not be performing as well and make sure that they are all stars.
Sounds fun to me.
Yeah, and MSP, just a quick intro to where we are, which my slide did not update, so I'm just going to be going and talking you through it from here. MSP is a community of over 20,000 sales leaders, sales ops, and other sales professionals who come together and get answers to the questions they need via a rigorous online forum and incredible events like this, as well as hopefully in-person events sometime soon. If you are not already a member, we will be adding you to the community after this, so get excited for that. And now we're very excited today to be sponsored by Atrium. And joining us from Atrium is Pete Kazanjy.
Yo.
Who is co-founder and CRO of Atrium and also the founder of Modern Sales Pros and author of Founding Sales. So Pete, can you please give yourself, I gave you a brief introduction, but can you dig in more to your awesomeness and then tell us what we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Pete Kazanjy. I'm the founder and CRO at Atrium. Atrium makes data-driven sales management software that help managers, AE managers, SDR managers, AM, CSM managers use data to improve team performance. So that's what I do during the day. I'm also the founder of Modern Sales Pros, and prior to both of that, I wrote a book on startup sales called Founding Sales that kind of catalogs all the experience I had going from being a business generalist founder at my last software company, TalentBin, that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. So being our first business generalist founder, to being our first sales rep, to a sales manager, to a sales leader, etc. So that's, I kind of think about sales a little bit, you know, just here and there. And I'm really pumped to be talking about, you know, how to transform underdogs and kind of rep performance via coaching and data. So that's me.
Awesome. And just a quick housekeeping note before we get into it today. Please feel free to drop your questions, and definitely drop your questions in the Q&A section of your screen. We will be answering those throughout this event. If your question doesn't get answered, we'll probably be reaching out afterwards to let you know what we can help with. And with that, let's move on to our event. Here you go, Pete.
Yeah, let me go ahead and share my screen here. Boop, boop, boop. I'm going to try to share the correct screen as opposed to the incorrect screen, and thereby have like the wild house of mirrors where it's like infinite Pete. My wife would be like, dude, one is enough. All right, can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes, Pete.
Yes, killer. I think as I was putting these slides together, this is probably my favorite slide. I was like, Ted Lasso, world's best coach, plus Zach Galifianakis, worst pronunciation ever, and his math, the math meme. We're gonna merge the two here in this conversation, but specifically what we're going to be talking about is how you can use data in coaching in order to really improve rep performance. We already talked about this, right? Couple coaching resources that I've really been loving recently that I wanted to share with everybody. Book by Corey Bray and Hillman Sori called 5 Secrets of Sales Coach. We'll talk about a little bit more in a second. And then also Crushing Quota by Michelle Vazana. Michelle was one of the co-authors of Cracking the Sales Management Code with Jason Jordan. So Cracking the Sales Management Code is like the Bible of like data-driven sales. And Crushing Quota is all about management and coaching. Which is kind of like how you take data and turn it into changed behavior. And these are both things that are kind of my recent obsessions there. And I think we're going to drop a link in the chat there if folks want to grab a free copy of those books. But these are some things that I'm kind of obsessing about recently. I love them. And actually, Michelle gave the the keynote at the MSP Summit.
She did.
2 weeks ago, whenever that was. Cool. So why should managers coach? Well, because managers, specifically line managers, are kind of the highest leverage way of improving team performance. A couple examples of this. Gartner's done some studies on this where high performing managers drive all sorts of good stuff. So, a quarter higher rep productivity, better retention, higher effort, etc. Essentially, what happens is like good things happen when you coach, and when you're a good manager. And specifically, when you get into coaching as a key behavior of managers, these are some stats that Michelle calls out in Crushing Quota. So the top 25% of managers, when looking at kind of like the blend of managers, kind of the histogram, generate 39% more revenue than the bottom 25%. And usually what that kind of averages out to across organizations is $3.5 million more attainment per year. So it's like not nothing, right? It's 40% more revenue than the bottom 25%. And what's really fascinating is that the top 25% of those managers, the big difference with them is they get more reps to quota, right? Like they get more productivity out of all of their players. Whereas the middle managers and kind of like the bottom quartile managers, they have some outperforming reps who are going to kick ass regardless, right? They could have a potted plant as a manager and they'd still just set the world on fire. But the really big delta with high performing managers is that they get their reps to success. They get more reps to success through coaching, by changing them, right? By one of the things that I like to describe it as, it's like alchemy, right? You take lead, you turn it into bronze, you turn it into gold, and that's what great managers do. Organizationally, it drives great management drives 10% more revenue across their team. And then this is really fascinating because when we think about sales enablement and like how do you improve rep behavior, oftentimes we think about sales enablement doing things with reps, right? Helping them do better discovery, helping them with better behaviors. But the fascinating thing is that companies that allocate more of their training and enablement resources to managers drive 15% more revenue to goal, which kind of makes sense if you think about it, because what you're doing is you're making the people who are like, if there's one sales enablement person or two sales enablement people for like 50 reps or 100 reps, that's a lot of like peanut butter to kind of spread thinly across a lot of toast. Whereas if you make the managers awesome, well, those managers, they have 6 reps or they have 8 reps or what have you, or 10 SDRs. And so by making the managers better managers, you can you drive better outcomes. And so the question, of course, then is like, okay, well, why do managers struggle with this? And I think there's kind of two things there. One, manager enablement isn't something that's sufficiently invested in for the reasons that we just kind of discussed in the previous slide. And then the second thing is that most organizations, when you think about the tooling that we provide managers in order to help them manage better and use data in order to manage better, they're not for managers, right? They're walls of charts that are for analytically driven. They're essentially analyst power tools, right? So whether that's BI or dashboards or what have you, they're things that have historically been for analysts but not for managers. And so and if you think about where managers come from, there are reps that have been promoted, SDRs that have been promoted, and what have you, and they haven't necessarily been trained in these things, let alone they don't necessarily come from this world of data-driven analysis and what have you, which is a shame, because if you think about the things that are needed in order to be a successful manager, there's a bunch of different things that managers ought to be spending their time doing. Yes, they should be doing deal inspection and strategy. That's the thing that most managers are actually very good at, because it's the thing that you do as a rep. But the problem is that there's about a half dozen other things that you should be doing. You should be tracking progress towards goals. You should be doing database one-on-ones, not kind of like tell me a story-based one-on-ones. And certainly one-on-ones shouldn't be all about deal inspection. It's very different things. You should be identifying issues and fixing them. You should be tracking ramp, et cetera, et cetera. And so the problem is that because of the issues that we described previously, what managers usually end up doing is it's just like deal inspection strategy. Hey, what's going on with these deals? Hey, what's going on with this deal? Hey, what, hey, Nora, when's that deal coming in? And so this is the downside, right? And this is the thing right here. This is the bad behavior that leads to the converse of this, where the underperforming managers, the bottom quartile managers, underperform because they're just doing this stuff right here. They're not doing this stuff right here, which they should be doing. They're just doing this stuff right here. And so the reason why, the argument that I would advance to y'all is that the reason why you should use, there are very clear reasons why you should use data to coach. And really what it comes down to is it comes down to leverage and truth, right? Or the opposite of anecdata. Anecdata is kind of one of my favorite joke words. It's like an anecdote with data.
Yeah, I like it.
It's like here's a piece of data.
Right?
It's an anecdote. Sorry, here's an anecdote.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna pretend it's data. No. And so if you think about it, riding along on calls is low leverage. You never know if you're on the right call or not with that rep, right? Might be a downfunnel call, might be a first call. The rep might be successful on that one versus on another one. Closing deals for your reps is low leverage. Right? There's only one of you, there's 8 of them. Even if you raise the win rate by from 20% to 25%, you can't be on all those calls, right? But if we can change the rep to be better and improve their behaviors, they're going to close better or sell better on all their calls, even the ones that you're not on. Remote staff makes it really hard to do organic instrumentation. I'm on our sales floor right now at our office, and there's no reps on it because a bunch of them are working from home right now. So historically, the way that managers have oftentimes done data-driven coaching is through what I like to call organic instrumentation. Like, oh, I heard that talk track. It was bad, or it's loud in here. People are doing a lot of activity, and then even more so, like listening to lots of calls is also low leverage. Even if you have call recording software that you can go and listen to calls on, even if you're listening to 1.5x, like that's a lot, right? That's all, like you just created a bunch of work for yourself. Oops, and I accidentally swiped back on my magic mouse there. You're creating a bunch of work for yourself as opposed to honing in on like the specific problem area in a rep's deal motion or sales motion to then hone in and say like, oh, I should listen to 5 of these specific types of calls, as opposed to just kind of like, wading through bales and bales of hay trying to find needles, even if you're wading through the hay at like 1.5x, right? And then of course recurring deal inspection is lower leverage as well, because it just shows you a deal by deal snapshot. And so the important thing is that with data you can see around corners. You can actually see like a problem coming down the pike for a rep. You can see that they're going to have a deal, they're going to have a bookings problem in 60 days, 90 days, et cetera, because of like low opportunity inflow or what have you. And then moreover, with data, what you can, not only can you identify problems, but you can also have a feedback loop to see if your solutions are working. And so this would be my argument to everybody as to why they should use data to coach. One way that I kind of think about this is related to actually Michelle talked about this in her keynote presentation last 2 weeks ago. Is this notion of an OODA loop? So observe, orient, decide, and act. It actually comes from air-to-air combat concept. It's from this gentleman named Boyd. I actually forget his first name. John Boyd, excuse me. Where essentially what you're doing is you're observing the world in order to figure out like what's wrong. You're orienting within it in order to say like, you're observing the world and saying, okay, what's the problem here? And that's the orientation. Oh, the low win rate or the low ASP or the low activity or what have you. You then decide on the next action that's going to drive resolution to that problem, and then you take that action. And then importantly, what you do is you loop back, right? You have to loop back again in order to understand, hey, did that work? Right? And so the way that process right there, that recurring process is extremely powerful for driving improvement in the sales organization. So how that kind of looks in sales management in a no data environment, it kind of, this will sound familiar to a lot of people, like, oh man, I didn't see that coming, right? I have this bookings problem that I'm contending with right now. All right, well, like maybe I'll like ask some questions in order to figure out like maybe what happened, what went down. And then, man, I have kind of like incomplete information here because I only just like ask questions. How do I know if I'm right? And then there's like no ability to act. And then whereas with data, the way that you can approach this is more in a OODA loopy behavior and say like, oh man, I see something weird over here. It's like my spidey senses are off. I'm seeing a little bit of an issue. Okay, well I'm gonna dig into the data and like orient myself in order to understand what the potential root cause is. Oh, okay, got it. That's the root cause right there. This rep's bookings are off because his ASP is low, and the reason why his ASP is low is because he's not adding services to every deal the way that we're supposed to. He's not complying with that program. Okay, cool. That's the problem. That's the root cause. Let's fix that. Great. Here's the coaching prescription where you have to send me all of your proposals before you send them out, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to validate that the services have been added to that, and then we're going to have a meeting every 2 weeks to look at your ASP and see if it's improving. Right? So you can see the very different behaviors here. And so the outcomes associated with this column will be very different than the outcomes associated with the approach in this column right here. And so what this kind of looks like systematized in a sales organization, especially around like a one-on-one, would be when you're creating your one-on-one, you create an agenda, you create the data assets associated therewith, you have a recurring meeting for that on the calendar, and then importantly, what you do is you have this loop. Hey, a loop, just like in the prior 2 slides previously, where you review the assets, identify issues, you prepare for what that topic or what you're going to be talking about there. You have a discussion to root cause things and get alignment and agreement on what the next actions are going to be. You agree on that, and then you loop back, right? You loop back, say, hey, did that work? Hey, did that work? Hey, did that work? And then that's how we drive improved outcomes there. Probably one of my favorite ways of doing this right now is the closed loop coach methodology. There's a bunch of different coaching methodologies out there. There's Grow, et cetera, but this is kind of my favorite one right now, and it's characterized in that book, 5 Secrets of a Sales Coach, which I really, 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 really like. And that's the mechanism by which you can deploy this right here. So kind of some examples of what that might look like what is coaching versus not coaching. The left column here would be examples of like not coaching, not helpful, right? The right column would kind of be analogs of that. So an example of like not coaching would be like, hey, when's that Lockheed deal coming in? Versus, hey, what's concerning you about that Lockheed deal? Why might it not close? Now this is just deal inspection right here, which is fine. Right, deal inspection is important for coaching. It just can't be the only one, the only variant. An example of not coaching with, hey, can you make this forecast bigger? Sure, I guess I'll just like inflate all the numbers, right? Versus, hey, I've noticed, so data, I've noticed that the forecast is pacing behind. Are there ideas on things that we can pull forward, or are there things that we can avoid in the future? Because unfortunately, usually like by the time a forecast is hosed, there's not really a hell of a lot that you can do about it. Usually like it got hosed 30 or 60 or 90 days ago or 120 days ago. And so that's like, this is the thing is, hey, what was the root cause for how we ended up in this situation right here with a light forecast for this quarter? Because we might be able to save it and pull a rabbit out of our hat right now, but probably more importantly, what we want to do is make sure that we don't end up in this situation in the future, again, by seeing around corners. I need you to do more activity, not coaching. So, hey, I've noticed that your meeting volumes are low over the last 4 weeks. Data, right? What might be contributing to that? Is there something that we can, oh man, I have a bunch of internal meetings. Oh man, I fell off the round robin. Oh man, my account, my account plan is off. Oh, okay, that's the root cause. Let's fix that. And so you can see the difference between kind of like non-coaching behaviors and coaching behaviors is really about like approaching with a hypothesis, usually ideally informed by data, and then forming together a mechanism by which to resolve that. Right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about systematizing this coaching behavior. So hopefully I've made an argument to you about why you should coach, right, and why you should data to coach, and then specifically how and some examples of that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about making sure that it actually happens, right? Systematizing this. Cool. So how do you systematize the observation component of data-driven coaching and sales management? Well, what you got to do is you got to have time on the calendar to make sure it happens. And so kind of examples of this, we have a joke in our sales teams called calendar is destiny. Got to put it on the calendar, ideally in a recurring fashion. That'll actually make sure that it happens. And so kind of some examples of ways you can do that would be recurring meetings, right? Recurring meetings that are focused on observation, orientation, decision, and action. Probably the easiest example of this would be a pipeline review. It's probably ones that we all do, so I'm not going to talk about that too much. Another one would be like a deal strategy meeting, where the way that we do this in our organization, we actually do communal pipe reviews that are kind of more focused on just like the parameters of deals as opposed to getting deep into a deal strategy on 2, 3, or 4 deals that's done individually with a rep. But again, this is just deal focused. The places where we can really get deep on behaviors that need, like issues and behaviors that need to change, are not in these. This is like where we do our day-to-day knife fighting of trying to close deals. And so a great example of that would be an effective one-on-one, right, where the one-on-one is not focused on deals. Right? It's focused on reviewing metrics as related to that rep, and then progress on coaching initiatives. And HR topics and other things as well. The way that we do this is we do a bi-weekly one-on-one with me and my reps. So every other week for a half hour, because the reason why we can do it every other week and only focus on it for a half hour is because we're not doing these things in that meeting. We're not talking about deals in that meeting. Kind of a bigger version of this might be a QBR, where at the end of a quarter, we do a look back across the quarter and say, hey, what happened? What were the root causes of that happen? Was it good? Great. Let's celebrate that. What were the root causes of why it turned out great? So such that we can keep that rolling for the next quarter, and then also maybe systematize that across the rest of the team. Conversely, if it was bad, it was not great, what was the root cause of that? What was the issue? Because we want to make sure that we don't have that same issue next time. And then what can we do to systematize the solution of that root cause that made this quarter not so great? And another example, this could be a call reviews. So this is something that we do on our team, is we essentially do film sessions where once a month we review 1 or 2 calls and just kind of do like a breakdown of it. It's like watching game tape as a team collectively. But these ones right here are really the ones that do like the heaviest lifting, at least in my sales organization. And all of them have data that come to them, different views and different reports. What this can kind of look like, this is like an operating rhythm that this might look like. We have a sales team meeting, stand-ups, you got communal pipe review. I guess I need to add to these deal strategy and one-on-ones. I was tempted to take a screenshot of my calendar, but then I was like, it'll kind of be heinous. Cool, so this is how we systematize the observation and make space for that. But then the next question is, okay, well, like, how do you make sure that you have the assets, the relevant assets? And so what that kind of comes down to is just making sure that you have those data assets available and embedded in those meetings, in the agendas, right, in the Google Docs or the document agendas, in the meeting invites. And so just as like some kind of basic principles around how to do this, reports and dashboards are kind of going to be the things that are going to be primarily doing the heavy lifting in those various meetings. These are just some general principles for how to think about this. When you think about a report should be answering a specific question. Like, how many ops have the SDRs created so far this month? Or how many untouched opportunities does each AE have right now? That's a pipeline hygiene question. how much pipeline is closing in the coming 90 days by rep? That's a forecasting question. How many emails did each SDR send last week? That's an activity question, right? And so reports answer a question. And then similarly, dashboards are usually an aggregation of reports and visualizations. And the way you should think about dashboards, and this is one of the things that people kind of trip themselves up on a lot of times, is they create these like massive kitchen sink dashboards that are like, create this massive wall of charts. And so what you really want to think about is this dashboard is for consumption at this point in time for this meeting, right? Or for it's for this point in time. So an example of this would be this dashboard is used in an AE one-on-one to review performance metrics during the current month, right? So that would have a certain set of questions, those reports, aggregated together into a dashboard for review in that one-on-one. And this would be very different than this dashboard, than an SDR stand-up dashboard. This dashboard is used at noon every day to see how SDRs are doing on their daily performance metrics. That's going to be a different set of questions with different time intervals than this one right here. The worst thing you could possibly do would be to mix the reports of those dashboards together into one mega dashboard, where literally what you're doing is like spending your time hunting through all the various panels in order to figure out what's going on there. And so what you want to do is you want to be intentional about the composition of those assets so they tie to the point of the event where you're actioning that. Similarly, when you're thinking about how to compose those reports and those metrics, usually what you're going to want to do is like more than one view per metric. The best way, the example I like to use there is the concept of a total and a trend, right? Like the total number of opportunities in each AE's pipe right now, and then alongside that would be the trend of opportunity inflow to each of our AEs on a month-by-month basis, or maybe it's a week-by-week basis if you're a higher velocity sales motion. And what those two things will allow you to do is, one, with the total, you'll be able to see what's going on right now, and with the trend, what you'll be able to see is like if there's changes over time, it's something that you need to engage with, right? Lastly, when you think about how you're going to compose these assets, there's kind of three kind of core ways of doing this. One would be CRM reporting. The great thing about that is that it's super common. The downside associated with that is that it's you have to build the relevant reporting yourself. You got to make sure the data gets in there A-OK, and you have to make sure that people are paying attention to it. BI is kind of a bigger kid version of this right here. The good news is that it's extremely powerful and flexible once it's set up. The downside is it takes forever to set up, and then usually once you have it set up, most normal human beings are not BI jockeys, not able to manipulate Tableau or Looker or Domo or what have you on their own. So you typically end up with managers like AE managers, SDR managers, kind of disregarding and certainly not being able to manipulate the views on their own in order to ask next questions. And then there's like a third option, which is what we think about, what we call data-driven sales management software, of which Atrium is one, which is very, very focused purely on helping managers use data and to improve team performance. And so the benefits of that is it's extremely quick to set up. All the reporting and metrics are already baked, and it hooks directly into your CRM and email and calendar system in order to calculate all those things. And has a little less flexibility than CRM reporting and BI. But then lastly, what it does is just statistically monitors all these KPIs in order to understand what's going on and kind of push that information to the manager. Kind of some examples of how to implement this. Again, trend versus total. This is customer facing meetings, right? And what we can quickly see is like, oh, hey, what's going on with this guy right here? Seems like he's low, like this person and this person. And moreover, with the trend, you can say, oh, looks like that's going down over time. That this Michael Darling character who's low right now actually had been higher previously, but is lighter right now. Looks like he's rebounding a little bit. And the same can be the case in like ramping, for instance. These are just kind of two really kind of key visualizations here. Ramping is obviously extraordinarily important time at which to make sure that you're bird dogging these leading indicators. When you're creating your dashboards, the way to kind of think about, as I was noting earlier, how to align the dashboard with the meeting. One thing you can do is you can kind of like map things out ahead of time. Like, okay, what am I trying to do here, right? I'm trying to do bookings by rep. I'm trying to do wins by rep. I'm trying to do meetings by rep. And so what that can do is like you can design that out and help you, and before you go and ask sales operations or the BI team or whatever to go ahead and build that for you. So this is just kind of like an example of a very basic one-on-one dashboard, a weekly one-on-one dashboard. So there's total number of open ops, as contrasted by untouched ops. So like, hey, you got a bunch of open ops. Are you actually working them? Or maybe you have a pipeline hygiene problem. Same with stuck opportunities here, pipeline forward 90 days, etc. So this is just a very basic, and then some level of effort things as well. You can do these things in a tabular fashion as well, just to make sure that you're visualizing those. My favorite way to do this, of course, is with Atrium. As a really quick advertisement for everyone who's kind of like watching right now, the way that we think about this is that managers are so important, SDR managers and AE managers are so important that they should have the relevant materials to manage by data, as opposed to kind of like generalist analytical tooling. And so the way that we think about this is that the way that this is done successfully is that managers should have all the KPIs that they need. They should be able to set and have goals being tracked for them. They should have early warning alerting on those various KPIs being pushed to them. So they're seeing around corners and not surprised by things. And they should be able, the software should actually do performance diagnosis for them in order to help them understand, hey, the reason why this rep's bookings are off is actually because their win rate is off. And the reason why their win rate is off is because their stage 3 conversion rate is off as compared to the other peers. So doing that root causing for them, all of this stuff should be able to be done automatically using statistics, which is exactly how Atrium goes about that. We work with a bunch of really rad companies in order to help them do exactly this. So that sounds compelling to anybody here. I would love for you guys to set up your own Atrium. I kind of think you'd be pretty stoked on it. Cool. So now that we're back to our regular scheduled programming here, the next thing would be, how do we get good at orientation and decisioning, right? Deciding what we're going to do about this information. Well, once you've got those assets in hand, what we have to do is we have to detect, diagnose, and then communicate those issues to our reps. So the way that we're going to do that is by getting good at reading the data. So some examples of that would be having good assets in hand, where you're looking at again, you've systematized the consumption of it because you have those assets tied to meetings and calendars. But now what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, here's when we're looking at a rep, in this case, there's a single rep here, Tank Muddlefoot. You can see he's at the top of the leaderboard with respect to opportunity ownership and with respect to new opportunity ownership, so inflow. We can see that he's at the top, he's near the top of the leaderboard with respect to win rate, but we can see that his ASP is a little low here. And so by looking at these core views, we can see where there's an area for opportunity here. In this case, it looks like there's an area for opportunity here around getting his ASP a little bit higher there, especially given the fact that his opportunity counts are certainly not the problem. Similarly, what you can do is you can look for issues and bright spots in totals and trends. So in this case, this is just a customer-facing meeting activity view right here. We can see that there's specific outperformance on the part of this rep right here. We can see that there's specific underperformance on the part of this rep right here. These would be indicators to potentially dig in. Why is this rep able to have this many more meetings than the rest of the team? Maybe that's worthwhile. That's something that we should investigate and discuss with him or her in our one-on-one, because if we can figure out what the secret to his success is there, we can replicate that across the rest of the team, specifically to these other reps that are a little bit lighter there. Similarly, why is this rep so low? The other thing you can do too, and this is why trends and totals are very helpful, is we can see if there's a change in behavior here. So for instance, what we can see is that across this whole team, there's a little bit of a degradation in terms of customer facing meetings across the whole team. But we have this rep right here who seems to be immune to that. And then moreover, we've seen that these reps right here have always kind of consistently been low. And so that's maybe something that we need to put on our agenda for our one-on-one to talk about why they're consistently low there. And then this rep right here in the orange used to be in band with everybody else with the higher performers, and now has kind of degraded off there. And so this is what we're doing right.
Hey, there's a quick question in the chat that pertains to this is, would you share the top and underperforming rep slides with the whole team in a meeting? Or is that something that you kind of want to stick to in your one-on-one so you're not really shouting out those people?
Yeah, I mean, the way that I would do that is present the data to everybody. Now, I think that when you have a leaderboard or when you have data, unless you're going to hide the information, which doesn't do anybody any favors, you're going to see the lower performers in there. Now, the presentation of it or the discussion of it is where you can make or break this. It's one thing to say, hey, this is really awesome, Cyril, high five to you and high five to you, King Richard. The next thing would be, okay, how can we get everybody else to do that? That's very different than saying, oh man, right? Like, Michael, you got to get your act together. That's done in a private discussion, right? Those are that has to be in a private discussion, right?
Great.
Cool.
Thanks.
So talking about getting good at reading data, similarly, what you can do is if you can monitor. So we were just talking about visually monitoring things. If you can use software to statistically monitor some of these KPIs, you can reduce some of the friction and the drag on the manager as the person has to be eyeballing these things. So examples here would be, statistical anomalies around, oh, this individual right here has fewer new opportunities coming into their pipe than their peers, and this individual here has way more opportunities coming into his pipe than he has historically there. Next, it's not sufficient just to kind of like detect that there's an issue. What you also want to be able to do is look at the fact that figure out a root cause of that. And so oftentimes these are what we like to refer to as metrics driver trees. And so if you're looking at a KPI that is problematic, so let's use the AE example here, where a KPI is problematic like bookings, what you want to do is you want to go right and see what upstream driver is driving that. Is it a deficit of wins? Is it a deficit of average sales price? Like the wins are fine, but it's low selling price. Is it a deficit of deal cycle? Okay, if it's a deficit of wins, is that because there's a deficit on win rate, or is it a deficit of attempts? If it's a deficit of win rate, well, upstream of that, what could be driving that? Is it a pipeline hygiene problem? Is the rep not managing their ops appropriately, as indicated by a bunch of untouched opportunities? Are there specific places in the pipeline where those ops are falling out of the pipe? And so this is what you want to do as a manager, is be able to go, quote unquote, go right to figure out that root cause. And the same is true with SDRs as well. So next, it's one thing to be able to observe and orient around these issues. The next thing is what we have to do is we actually have to make a plan to solve these. And so the best places for that is in a one-on-one and also those QBRs. It's really effective to make sure that you have a recurring agenda working doc there. So I have a hyperlink to an agenda and one-on-one working doc template right here. But specifically what you can see is like, hey, here's our meeting for this week. Here's the topics that the rep wanted to talk about. Here's the manager topics. Here's the current coaching area of emphasis, so the thing that we're working on right now. And then here's next actions that come out of that meeting. And so what you can kind of see, this is an example of that filled out where the rep wants to talk about the opportunity round robin, maybe feels like there's some inflow issues there. The manager wants to talk about prospecting activity in the open enrollment for healthcare, and then the current coaching area of emphasis is pipe hygiene, and the way that that's being measured is with untouched opportunity count. And then the next action that's like the coaching prescription that is going to be audited, and then we're going to come back to it in 2 weeks to make sure that we're doing this, is calendaring 2 1-hour blocks per week for pipe management. Because this is why it's insufficient to say like, hey, I think in the coaching, not coaching example we were talking about above, hey, you got to clean up your pipe. That's not super helpful versus saying, hey, it would appear to me that there's a little bit of a pipe hygiene issue here, as indicated by these untouched ops right here. The reason why this matters is because it's going to negatively impact your win rate, and it's also going to, if those aren't real, it's going to fake your forecast. You're going to have a bunch of untouched ops that are not actually real, that are supposedly closing in 60 days or 90 days or what have you. So what I want us to do is I want you to put 2 1-hour blocks on the calendar, again, coaching or calendar is destiny, and for pipe management, and use this report as your to-do list to go through and make sure that you're engaging those ops and taking the next action. And you know what? I'd like you to BCC me on those outbound so I can make sure that it's actually happening. And then we're going to come back to this in 2 weeks, and we're going to look at this untouched op count report, and we're going to see if this is improving or not. Are we agreed? Okay, great. Right? So that's data-driven coaching. That's prescriptive and supportive, but drives a behavioral change in order to improve rep performance. And then you come back to it. Hey, did that work? Wonderful. All right, we don't have an untouched op problem anymore. What's our new issue? Oh, our new issue is your ASP is light. Let's now work on that, because we slayed that last dragon. Here's a new dragon for us to work on. The same version, the same example of that would be, or sorry, the more grandiose example of that would be QBRs, where what you can do is, like, the QBR is really helpful to kind of take a step back, see what worked, what didn't work last quarter, and then set an intention for the plan for the coming quarter, and then track that going forward. And so what's cool about this is, like, what you can do is you can set a plan for that quarter, and then that can go into that recurring coaching area emphasis. So a couple examples here. And again, there's a QBR coaching template here that folks can get access to after the fact. But highlights for a given rep, lowlights here, plan for the coming quarter, right? Our coaching areas of emphasis, and it's going to be different on a per rep basis. And this rep right here, this rep had a lot of success, and their win rate was way up, which was a area of focus for them. They had some down funnel deal deterioration that happened in the last quarter as a result of some kind of like behavioral kind of sales process deviations. And so what the plan is for this quarter is to avoid that, those deal deterioration through kind of like down funnel deal deterioration through kind of lackadaisicalness on that selling motion, and the mechanism by which, and that's the intention that was set. And the way that we're going to measure that is to make sure that our win rate continues to stay high on those higher ASP opportunities. And it's different on a per rep basis. But the thing is that you have to take the opportunity to set the intention for the coming quarter. So a couple examples of what this looks like. So that's kind of a framework. And so what I wanted to provide is just a couple examples of what this looks like in practice across a couple of reps who have been anonymized in order to protect the guilty. Cool. So an example here was a rep was on track to miss for a month, right? And so what was weird here is that when we went back and inspected to try to figure out what the issue was, so when we oriented to figure out what the issue was, we looked at opportunity inflow to see if that was a problem, if there was like a dip in opportunity inflow. And it turned out that there wasn't at all. So it wasn't a case of like, hey, you know what, I don't have enough leads, I don't have enough stuff on my plate. What we ended up finding though, that when we looked at a more sophisticated metric of opportunity advancement, so stage advancement, so the number of opportunities that got to above disco, you actually could see that in this month right here, there's actually a pretty substantial degradation on the part of that rep, the rep being the green one here. So you can see the op inflow was consistent, but for whatever reason, conversion rates fell off here. And when we were kind of looking at it, this is the end of the quarter for the rep, and so the hypothesis was that the rep was like maybe not paying as close attention and being as tight around top of funnel as we would have preferred. And so, you know, that's an issue, and it ended up showing up 60 days later, 75 days later, unsurprisingly from a deal cycle standpoint. And so the important thing though is that we then took that information and then put in place a back check to avoid that in the future. So we said, oh man, it's insufficient to look at new opportunity inflow. We also have to look at discos that are being achieved as well. And then moreover, what we did is we set a goal on it to make sure that we're tracking progress towards that on a monthly basis. So we couldn't get surprised by that again. And so the good news was is that we haven't had that issue since. And so this is a great example of observing that there was an issue. In this case, the rep was off track for the month, digging in a little bit, orientating in order to see what the true root cause was, and then saying, oh, you know what, we're going to take an action based on this. We're going to make sure that we're tracking this going forward in order to prevent ourselves from having the same issue next time. All right, so it's that loop. Another example around deal behavior. Right, so the previous thing was more around opportunity progressions. This is a little bit more nuanced, kind of like double black diamond. So in this case, we had a rep whose bookings were light as compared to some of their peers. And so what we did was we looked at this, kind of goes to the point about it's insufficient to like ride along on all the calls, or it's insufficient to listen to a bunch of calls and it's low leverage. What we did was we looked at his opportunity conversion rate on a stage-by-stage basis. So these are the different stages of the sales motion. And what you can see, and this is the average, the blue, and then the orange is his conversion rates. And what you can see is that he was light with respect to conversion out of stage 0. He was really light with respect to conversion out of proposal. And then for whatever reason, he was light around contract to close. And so what we did was there were a couple actions that came out of that. One was we worked really hard on top of funnel progressions. You can see these. This is actually a different view of this. This is over time, the conversion rate out of discovery up to the next stage and down funnel. You can see that it was a little bit light here, and so through specific coaching and behavioral change and mock calls and intention setting with that rep, you can see that it jumped up substantially. His conversion rate jumped up substantially from the progressing from discovery here, which as a result drove the number of ops getting down funnel for him, because the conversion rate lifted. And so all of a sudden, whereas previously he was only getting anywhere between 4 to 7 ops into this pilot stage, so down funnel, all of a sudden now he was at 10, 11, 12 opportunities getting into that stage, which is a way better place to be. Same thing happened from down funnel. By being another area of coaching was, hey, we're going to help you get better at getting things out of proposal, making sure that you're controlling the deal cycle, because we know that this is the issue here. So what we're going to do is we're going to do specific call listening and then coaching around that to make sure that you're controlling your deal cycle and making sure that things are not unmanaged. And what you can see is a substantial improvement in terms of win rate from that proposal stage subsequent to that. And so what ended up happening was, whereas previously this is what his conversion rates out of those various stages look like, now he popped up above team average there. as a result of pinpointing exactly where the problem was, putting a prescription in place around that, validating that prescription was being followed, or doing some of the prescription testing, right? So like mock calls, behavioral change, et cetera, validation of that, and then coming back to it on a recurring basis. Is this working? Is this working? Is this working? Is this working? And lo and behold, it does. And so and as a result, you can kind of see it. This is a pipeline ownership change over time that subsequent to that. So we went from kind of having this steady state around 20K, this is MRR, 20K in pipe in at any given point in time, and then that lifted very, very, very substantially subsequent to that. Cool. Last example here is a little bit even more granular, and it's around behavioral coaching, like on-call behavioral coaching. So this rep's issue here was that they had call behavior problems, and that was kind of injuring their close rates. And so what you can kind of see here is that, again, these are the different stages here. You can see that this rep had a pretty substantial problem with respect to conversion out of proposal here, and then out of contract. And so what was fascinating there is that when we actually focused in on closing behaviors, in this case specifically focused on closing phrases, making sure that this person was driving to the next action, asking about buying process, asking about blockers to a deal, and then making sure to set next meetings, you can see that, again, this is the win rate from proposal here. It had been kind of in the doghouse here, and then jumped up substantially here as a result of the change in behaviors. And related to this, we also had this rep focused in on talking less during calls. So we actually use Gong over here at Atrium, and we actually use Gong data in Atrium through an integration in order to, in this case, you can see that her talk ratio as compared to the team average was quite a bit higher. So not letting prospects have an opportunity to talk, and which of course gates the ability to do discovery. And then by focusing in on that and saying, hey, literally what I want you to do is when you have the temptation to say the next sentence, just stop talking, right? And allow the prospect to react, or like instead of asking a question, then asking multiple follow-up questions in concert, just stop with the first question. You can see that talk ratio declined substantially there, which led to good behaviors. And again, you can see that the conversion out of the conversion rate from proposal to one jumped up dramatically for that rep there. And so I think, like, since we're kind of coming up on time here, what I would hope you all take away from this is that the goal here is to take coaching behavior where we literally make our reps better by not by closing their deals for them or inspecting what a specific problem is on a deal, but instead up leveling and seeing what the behavioral problems are that rep might have, whether it's low activity or conversion rate in a specific part of the funnel, or discounting behavior, or packaging behaviors, or what have you, but identifying the pervasive behavioral area for improvement, and then coaching them to resolve that then unblocks that gate to their performance and lifts their performance. And so if you can do that on a rep by rep basis, and it's going to be different on a rep by rep basis, you can lift all of your reps up for different reasons. And then that goes back to why top performing managers have more of their reps at quota. They don't have 2 reps bailing them out and everybody else is in the doghouse. They have all of their reps, maybe not all their reps, but they have way more of their reps getting to quota, and that's how those managers are outperforming. The way that they do that is through better coaching, ideally informed by data. And of course, the way that we go ahead.
I was going to say, if I can interrupt you really quickly, what you're saying really reminds me of a question that came in during registration, actually a couple of times, which is, it's great to know that you need to coach with data, but if you have a rep that's convinced that data said something different, or convinced he's doing the right things and doesn't take well to this coaching, how do you change his view? Is there any advice that you could give someone to working with that kind of behavior?
Yeah, for sure. And this is why another reason why coaching with data versus just kind of coaching in the abstract is really important, is because you're getting out of anecdata. Because oftentimes what will happen is a rep will say, hey, you know what, like the leads that I'm getting are problematic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then your point of view on that might be, well, actually, I think that your opportunity conversion rate is problematic as compared to everybody else here, but let's look at the data. And then you can look at new opportunity inflow split by op source. And if we look at, say we've got 8 reps on the team, like, yeah, it looks like everybody got 25 ops that went into their pipe last month. And moreover, when we split by lead source, looks like everybody has looks like everybody got the same amount of inbound and everybody is like doing the outbound. In fact, I think actually when I look at, and this is kind of changing what the root cause might be, hey, actually when I look at your lead mix, one of the things I'm observing is there's no self-prospected opportunities. But if you look at our 2 top performers right there, you can see that about 30% of their new opportunity inflow is AE self-prospected. And then if we go and we look at win rate, oh, wow, it looks like they have a 30% win rate on those AE self-prospected ops. So rather than, my point being that, like, rather than being like, well, this is my opinion, it's just like, hey, let's look at the data and be able to say, hey, you know what? It actually looks like you just need to prospect. Or yeah, actually that's not the fig leaf here. You just see, like, I think actually what we need to do is we need to work on your pipeline hygiene, because that's what the data seems to indicate right here. It'd be like a baseball player who like strikes out and comes back to the dugout and he's like, oh, okay, cool, like you really had a hard time with that curveball right there. And it's like, no, I just need more at bats. It's like, no, I think literally we just saw you strike out on a curveball, right? And as a result, let's have you do a bunch of batting practice on curveballs,
Mm-hmm.
and get you better.
Great. And then quick follow-up on that one, because we also saw this question come in a lot, is how often do you generally do coaching?
Yeah, so the answer to that is all the time, right? In these places right here, right? So this is how you do it.
ABC
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, so what we like, the coaching is different in your deal strategy, meaning you're doing deal coaching, right? Behavioral coaching. That in your one-on-ones, ideally what you're doing is you're doing behavioral coaching.
Mm-hmm.
The same with your QBRs,
Yeah.
right? So, but what you're doing is you're constantly you're making space on the calendar to continuously be doing this loop right here. Cool. So I think we're almost out of time there. I hope everyone, this was useful for everybody. Again, just as a parting shot here, this is literally what we do all day long with Atrium, with like software that's set up specifically to help AE, SDR, and AM CSM managers use data to improve their team performance. We work with a bajillion really amazing customers, and if you want to have more resources, we have an amazing academy of like Resource Academy, and then of course it takes 90 seconds to set up an Atrium account if you want to see what's going on with your team. So thanks everybody for the time, and we'll send this recording out afterwards.
Yeah. Thank you, Pete. Thanks everyone, and hope to see you at another event soon. Thank you.